now, it's your local forecast on the Weather Channel.
Good morning. Storm Watch is sponsored by the Home Depot. And we'll start things off by checking out the tropical update. And of course, the tropics remaining very, very active. First of all, we have Hurricane George. But then upstream from Hurricane George, we have two other tropical systems, which we'll be mentioning very shortly in just a moment. But first of all, let's focus in on Hurricane George. Right now, a minimal hurricane with winds of 75 miles per hour. But as it continues to emerge over the open waters, further strengthening is likely. Currently, the latest coordinates have it roughly centered 580 miles southeast of Miami. It continues to move off towards the west-northwest. Now, the official forecast track devised by the Hurricane Forecast Center, they're suggesting that probably it's going to be continuing to move off towards the west-northwest, and at that rate, the eye of the hurricane may be passing over eastern Cuba later on today, and then perhaps it may eventually set its sights on portions of southern Florida. So this is the highest strike probability. But actually throughout this entire area, those of you who have some family or friends living here, you definitely have to take the necessary precautions just in case the hurricane does move towards those areas. At this point, we have hurricane warnings for portions of the Bahamas and extending on into western sections of Hispaniola and a large part of eastern Cuba as well. But then we also have hurricane watches that have gone into effect for the northwestern Bahamas and also the southern tip of Florida, from Bonita Beach southward and Deerfield Beach southward, which does include the Florida Keys under hurricane watches. And we've had reports of some mandatory and voluntary evacuations taking place in some portions in southern Florida. So again, a potentially very serious situation setting up around the region. The strongest hurricane force winds still extend out some 60 miles from the eye of the hurricane, with tropical storm force winds extending out 175 miles from the eye of the hurricane. So a large swath of real estate here could see some very strong gusty winds, squally conditions, and very heavy rainfall. We've already had reports of nearly 2 feet of rain in the last couple of days over portions of Puerto Rico. So heavy rain in association with Hurricane George, and that means some devastating mudslides and some dangerous flash flooding too is a possibility. We'll likely see at least 5 to 10 inches of rain in the path of Hurricane George, and some of the mountainous areas could easily pick up 10 inches or maybe 20 inches of rain. So some very heavy rain and flooding likely too with George. At the same time, though, we have Tropical Storm Ivan. It's moving to the north-northwest. That same motion is generally expected throughout the day today. And then Hurricane Jeanne, which will likely be intensifying throughout the day, so further strengthening is likely. Stay tuned. We'll have more on Hurricane George, though, coming up in just a moment.
Hurricane George ravages the Dominican Republic as South Florida prepares. Details and weather across the nation next on Weather Center after your local forecast.
This program was sponsored by the Home Depot.
We have the how-to clinics where we show the customer how to do the project themselves.
After doing it for the first time, they feel a lot more comfortable with it.
They get involved, they get pumped, they take notes, they come to the Home Depot, they get the products, they're taught how to do it, and they go home and they do it, and they're like, wow, I did it, and the Home Depot showed me how.
The word is out. A mandatory evacuation order is issued for all of the lower Florida Keys, including Key West. It's all part of preparing for the approach of a hurricane. Hurricane George is making its way to Cuba, a little weaker than before, but still with a punch when it reaches Florida. Good morning and welcome to Weather Center. I'm Marnie Stanier. We'll have a live report from the Miami area on Florida's hurricane preparations coming up in a minute, plus current stateside outlook. Los Angeles will be warm and partly sunny. Phoenix will be in the 90s, and as we change seasons, Philadelphia will have a breezy feel of fall. But first, let's go to Bruce Edwards in the Forecast Center with the latest on Hurricane George.
Thanks, Marnie, and good morning, everyone. We continue to track the progress of Hurricane George. It spent the night, actually spent much of the last 18 hours over land, and emerged off the west coast of the island of Hispaniola early this morning, and is now over the open waters, at least the center of the system is, over the Windward Passage between Cuba and Hispaniola. The 8 a.m. update from the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida, centered George at 19.8 north, 73.8 west, or approximately 580 miles southeast of Miami, Florida. It is a minimal hurricane, top sustained winds at 75 miles per hour. It continues to move northwest at 15, central pressure 996 millibars. Now, it's over the open waters, and we could see some increase in strength over the next 12 to 24 hours as the warm waters will continue to feed the system, Hurricane George. Now, these are all the watches and warnings presently in effect. The hurricane warnings in effect for eastern Cuba, for Haiti, for the central Bahamas, the southeastern Bahamas, and the Turks and the Caicos Islands. Now, with this last advisory, the hurricane warning for the Dominican Republic has been dropped. Now, hurricane watches are in effect for west central Cuba, for the northwestern Bahamas, and hurricane watches this morning were issued for South Florida and the area south of Bonita Beach on the west coast of Florida, and east Deerfield Beach on the east coast of Florida. From there south, that includes Dade and Broward counties and the dense population centers of the Gold Coast of Florida. It does not include, by the way, West Palm Beach. Just thought we'd point that out, but points south of Deerfield Beach, and it includes, of course, the Florida Keys. Now, mandatory evacuation has been ordered for the lower Keys as of 7 a.m. this morning. That's the area from Key West up to about the 7 Mile Bridge. Now, this could impact 100,000 or more people that were reported or ordered to evacuate. Now, they're going to try to do this in a very nice, orderly fashion. The farthest areas away from the mainland first. That's Key West and the lower Keys up to 7 Mile Bridge. Those evacuations are mandatory. Now, officials plan to move that order up the island chain as the day progresses to the middle Keys and eventually into the upper Keys. So, again, the lower Keys under an evacuation order. Now, the good news is, of course, no tolls will be collected on the bridges going across, so you can see you're free and clear. And also a reminder that in Monroe County, shelters in the Keys will not be open during the hurricane because of the potential strength of the storm. They would not be safe. So if you're going to sit there and ride out the storm, be advised you are on your own, my friends, and you are ordered to evacuate from the lower Keys. But if you choose to stay, they say, keep in mind you're on your own. There are no emergency services available during the storm, so it's a very dangerous proposition. We're joined now by Dr. Steve Lyons, our hurricane specialist, and the evacuation order given, and it's very imperative, I think, for folks to heed the orders when issued, but maybe not jump the gun and really sort of compound the situation there.
Absolutely not. You definitely want to evacuate when you're told to do so, but not prematurely. One, it may not be necessary to do it as we get more information, and two, you're just going to compound the problem and traffic will be at a standstill.
That's right. That's right. So they want an orderly evacuation. Right. Just like you had in school when you had fire drills. This class goes out first and this one and so on.
Exactly.
You want to follow the procedures. We look at the hurricane force winds that are in effect now, and you can see they're in the orange center, around the center of the hurricane, and tropical storm force winds in the yellow shaded region affecting parts of eastern Cuba. And as we look at the satellite picture, we can see the broad eye of the storm working off Hispaniola.
Yeah, we just got the latest. We have a NOAA research aircraft that's flown into the circulation and measured the central pressure. They got a 996 pressure and a maximum flight level wind of only 44 knots, which would indicate potentially this could be only a tropical storm or strong tropical storm. Of course, the other thing I was looking at, I was waiting for this observation at Guantanamo Bay. The wind there is currently 5 knots out of the north, even though the radius of 34 knot winds extends there. So I think we're probably looking at a system that's really a little bit weaker than we originally thought it was early in the morning as the new information comes in. However, that does not mean it cannot become a hurricane quickly, or the Hurricane Center does not still call it a hurricane as more information comes in. But right now, it definitely looks like an absolutely minimal hurricane at best based on the latest information from the reconnaissance. And the peripheral winds are rather weak out here. But keep in mind, those things can change very, very quickly. Do not change anything you're doing now.
Of course, the waters there are warm, and that is generally the feeding ground for these tropical systems, and so that would bode perhaps ominously for potential development later on today.
Absolutely. As this gets up here into the warmer water, if in fact it gets a track north of Cuba, it could develop very, very quickly. It could go up a category or 2 in 6 to 12 hours without any problem.
Well, eastern Cuba is hurrying their preparations for the arrival of Hurricane George, and so are residents of South Florida. We mentioned the mandatory evacuation in the lower Keys. That's the only mandatory evacuation in effect right now. But folks in South Florida, especially those that experience the wrath of Andrew, don't have to be told twice to make preparations. And here to report on the conditions in South Florida and those preparations, live, the Weather Channel's Jim Cantori in Key Biscayne.
Hey, Bruce, I think those hurricane watches were just a formality to the people down here. They were underway yesterday as several folks took heed of what this hurricane did to Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic and the Virgin Islands and said, hey, I'm not going to wait till last minute. I'm not going to get caught off guard this time. And a lot of people have been heading out to the hardware stores, to the grocery stores, getting supplies. There's just been a constant feed of supplies coming in, too, knowing that the demand would be great. So all the way around the circle, preparations have been made. Now, what we've heard out of Monroe County, as you mentioned, that's the mandatory evacuation down there in the Keys. Schools are closed there, as you would figure out. And, Bruce, that was a great analogy of talking about how it was just like a school fire drill. People will be stepping out in steps today and in classes, if you will, and that's exactly how they're going to do it. The upper Keys should be evacuated as well this afternoon, and no places for shelters down there. They're all going to be back here in the mainland. So if you're thinking about staying, well, I'll go last minute to a shelter, no, that's absolutely right. They're going to be up here in the mainland. But the word is out of Miami this morning, even as the hardware stores weren't even open. At 5:30, I heard that there was about 150 people at the local hardware store here just waiting to get in. So no doubt the preparations are going to continue at a rapid pace. And as I mentioned earlier, Bruce, they are praying for a miss and preparing for a hit. Back to you.
All right, thank you. Jim Cantori, live in Key Biscayne, Florida. We'll have reports from Jim throughout the course of the day on preparations in South Florida. And, of course, everyone in South Florida, they're very, very anxious. Where's it going to go? And the exact track is a little uncertain, but there are several factors entering into perhaps where that system will be moving.
They sure are, Bruce. First of all, the upper-level circulation features...
First day of fall to you. I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso. Welcome to Weather Center. Folks in South Florida are boarding up and hitting the road now that mandatory evacuations are underway for all the lower Keys, including Key West. North of the area, in the middle and upper Keys, voluntary evacuations have been issued. It's all due to Hurricane George, which could track into Florida early Friday. Bruce Edwards has the latest from the Forecast Center. Bruce?
Thanks, Mark. Good morning, everyone. We have the latest information from the National Hurricane Center with the latest advisory on Hurricane George. And here are the particulars for the 11 a.m. advisory. George was centered at 19.7 north, 74.2 degrees west, or approximately 570 miles southeast of Miami, Florida. Its top sustained winds, minimal hurricane strength at 75. It is moving west-northwest at 15. And the central pressure of this storm is about 996 millibars, according to the NOAA reconnaissance plane that was into the storm system itself. So, again, this is a minimal hurricane, but still watches, warnings posted throughout this. It's, again, got a little of the stuffing knocked out of it coming across Hispaniola. Here's the information as far as the watches and warnings are concerned. Now, hurricane warnings in effect for eastern Cuba, for Haiti, the central and southeastern Bahamas under hurricane warnings, and the Turks and the Caicos Islands. Now, tropical or hurricane watches are in effect for west central Cuba, for northwestern parts of the Bahamas, and for South Florida. That hurricane watch was posted for South Florida early this morning. from Bonita Beach and south of Bonita Beach on the west coast through the Florida Keys and south of Deerfield Beach on the east coast. That includes the dense population centers of Fort Lauderdale and Miami, as well as the Florida Keys. Now, mandatory evacuation order was issued at 7 a.m. this morning for the lower Keys. Now, that's from the south end of the Keys to about 7 Mile Bridge to Key West. Now, that's where the mandatory evacuation order has been issued, with voluntary evacuations elsewhere, although we may be moving up the island chain closer to the mainland as the afternoon progresses with the evacuation orders. And just in case you're down there on the lower Keys, you're thinking, nah, I'm going to sit and ride it out. Just a reminder of a few things that if you sit there, Monroe County shelters in the Keys will not be open during the hurricane because of the potential strength of the storm. And if you choose to stay in the Keys during the storm, keep in mind that you're on your own. There are no emergency services that will be available if that storm, if something happens when you're trapped down there. So again, it's best to heed the evacuation orders as issued by the emergency management centers. And for the lower Keys, that evacuation order is in effect. And we'll continue to keep you updated on any additional evacuation orders that are issued for the Keys or other parts of South Florida. That's the only mandatory one at the present time. Dr. Steve Lyons joins us right now, and Dr. Lyons has been watching this hurricane, and it crossed over the island of Hispaniola, a big island with tall mountains. It got knocked apart a bit, but it's still hanging together there.
Yes, it is a minimal hurricane, but don't necessarily let that fool you. And South Florida has plenty of time to develop into a stronger hurricane, and that is the forecast to do so.
Well, the wind field around the hurricane center itself, hurricane gust is 60 miles from the center, and again, the most important thing is tropical storm force winds extending out 175 miles from the center, and that tells us, well, a long time before that storm gets to you, you will be feeling tropical storm force winds, and it's tough to do a lot when that happens.
That's right. Almost impossible to put up shutters, for example, on gale force winds.
Here's a look at the visible satellite picture now coming into focus, and we can see the center of the hurricane.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, you can see a very well-defined circle now. It looks like a donut sitting in the larger circulation center. That's it right there. Continues to move off to the west-northwest, generally in this general track. We expect it to take a little more northward track and head up toward the Keys and South Florida here the next 48 hours or so.
Here's a little closer look at that once again. It's over very warm waters, and that generally is the engine that sort of drives these things.
That's right, and the water is even warmer up here than it is down here. So if it can get up in here without hitting too much mountain area, it could intensify fairly quickly. So we're sort of hoping that it comes over in here, but right now it looks like it's going to graze Cuba, and of course there's a big band of thunderstorms in there. They will have some pretty good winds out of that as it moves to the west.
Well, as we look at the situation as it stands down the windward passage, Jim Cantori, the Weather Channel, is down in Key Biscayne, Florida. He's been there to watch the preparations take hold, and it doesn't look like, Jim, we had to do much prodding of the folks down there to get them ready for this tropical system.
No, you know, Bruce, a bad dream can be something that can haunt you for quite some time, and that's exactly what Andrew has been to these folks down here, and no doubt they were ready to go yesterday. As a matter of fact, I think the people in South Florida anticipated that, or the people that ordered the supplies at some of the hardware stores and the supermarkets, because they actually had a ton of supplies brought in beforehand. So even though a lot of those have been going out as fast as they've been coming in, this area is well prepared, and a lot of folks are boarding up their homes. They're getting the water, they're getting the necessary supplies to take with them to the shelters if in fact they are going to evacuate. You mentioned the mandatory evacuations down in the Keys. It's very important that here in Dade County and also in Broward County that you do not evacuate. You let those people evacuate first, and we do this in a very orderly fashion. That is the #1 issue in getting people out of South Florida, is that we do it in an orderly fashion. I want to show you what is a beautiful day here in South Florida, albeit a little on the hot side for this Connecticut Yankee. But you can see here that as we look over into this area we're right here by the Rusty Pelican, and you can see the boats still sitting here. Folks, some of them have decided to come on in and grab their boats and pull them on out, and others will do so at a later time. But no doubt, folks battening down the hatches here and getting ready in case this thing decides to come ashore and strengthen as well. Back to you, Bruce.
All righty, thank you, Jim Cantori, live in Key Biscayne, Florida. We'll have more reports from Jim through South Florida throughout the course of the afternoon. Dr. Lyons, again, there's a lot of influences that determine where these tropical systems move. What are the influences on George at this point?
Well, there are, of course, a couple of them, both on intensity and on direction of motion. Right now, the system has been moving at a fairly good clip, and just to sort of ease the minds of people in South Florida, that have experienced Andrew. This is nothing like Andrew. It's a Category 1 hurricane. Andrew was almost a Category 5. The damage potential is nowhere near that, and unless it really strengthens a huge amount, it's not going to ever become an Andrew, and it's not forecast to at this stage. So I wouldn't panic too much on that end of it. You can see that the circulation center here of an upper level low is going to be a player in the helping it move to the north, and also a weak ridge here that's right through on either side of Florida. It may move through a weak ridge and come up into the South Florida area, but keep in mind there's a wide range of variability there out in the 72-hour time frame for track.
Alrighty, thank you, Dr. Steve Lyons. That's the information we have on George at this point in time. Of course, we'll have continuous updates throughout the day, so you can check back with this office. But if you have to step away from your TV, you're at the office, near your computer, check us out on the internet at weather.com for the latest information. Now, Mark gives us a look at the nation's weather on this first day of autumn, 1998. Mark?
Okay, thank you very much, Bruce. And this edition of your current weather and forecast brought to you by GM Pontiac. First thing we'll look at is your radar. And it's pretty quiet here in the eastern United States with a huge high pressure overhead. On the west side of that high, we have that flow coming up out of the Rockies and a couple of weak disturbances coming up.
The Comcast Network. Man's basic desire is to be free.
He will break loose his chains. He will decimate his enemies.
From director Steven Spielberg, a shattering drama comes into your home on pay-per-view. Morgan Freeman, Anthony Hopkins, Jaimin Hansu, and Matthew McConaughey. Sheer Power. Amistad. One of the most powerful films of the year. Easy to order at home on pay-per-view.
Every day is new. We tell you about the weather right now. How will it affect where you're headed? What about your plans? People count on us to get them through the day. I love that.
Right now, it's your local forecast on the Weather Channel.
Well, the tropics are very active, and as we take a look at the picture for you here, we see George moving its way across the Windward Passage. Here we see Ivan. This is a tropical storm. Here we see Jeanne. This is a hurricane. And this is kind of like a no-name system here that has been giving Bermuda an awful lot of wind this morning. It's been very windy here on the south side of this little circulation center. As we focus in on George, it continues on its west-northwest track. Minimal hurricane. It was beat up as it moved through the mountains here, and still looking at a gradual turn to the northwest in the forecast for later today into tonight. So residents of South Florida certainly want to be on a heightened sense of alert here. Hurricane watches in the lighter shade of orange. Hurricane warnings, central southern Bahamas, eastern Cuba, and still for Haiti here. And here's a look at the wind profile around the storm. Small area of barely hurricane force winds, but our system is getting better organized now as it moves out over the water here. So it has a great outflow above it. The only thing that's stopping this from really taking off are the land areas. And farther out in the Atlantic, Here is Ivan, tropical storm, no threat to any land areas. And here's Jeanne, moving its way off towards the west-northwest, and it will continue to intensify. So that is a look at the tropics stateside. And for our Spanish-speaking audience, we turn to meteorologist Gladys Rubio of our sister network, the Weather Channel Latin America, for a brief update on Hurricane George.
Gracias, Mark. Sí, efectivamente tenemos para ustedes la última información emitida por el Centro Nacional de Huracanes, que ubicaba a George, como ustedes pueden ver, en los 19.7 grados de latitud norte y los 74.2 grados de longitud oeste. Esto lo sitúa a 570 millas al sudeste de la ciudad de Miami, en Florida. George continúa siendo un huracán categoría 1 con vientos máximos de 75 millas por hora, mientras continúa su movimiento al oeste-noroeste a 15 millas por hora. Y ahora, con la actual trayectoria, se espera que George pudiera pasar más directamente sobre las provincias orientales durante el día de hoy. Manténgase aquí informado en el canal del tiempo, que estaremos hablando de George en las próximas horas. Aquí tienen la posible trayectoria. Recuerden ustedes que ahora se espera que George pase más directamente sobre las provincias orientales cubanas. Regresamos con Mark en el estudio.
Okay, thank you very much, Gladys. And stay with us. Coming up, we'll give you the latest on Hurricane George in Weather Center. Expert analysis coming up with Dr. Steve Lyons. But first, let's check on your local forecast.
George devastates the Dominican Republic and mandatory evacuation ordered for parts of the Florida Keys. This and other weather stories coming up on Weather Center.
It's only a little scratch.
Here a scratch, there a scratch, everywhere a scratch, scratch. And they're all an eyesore. What you need is GS27 Scratch Remover. It's new from Duralube. GS27 gets rid of those surface scratches and paint swirls quickly and easily. Simply rub it into the scratch, then polish to a beautiful finish. The scratch is gone. GS27 is not an abrasive, and it works wonders on any color. Would you do this to a brand new car? Ouch! But GS27 removes that ugly scratch quickly and easily. It'll even remove paint scrapes and unsightly rust. GS27 is only $14.95, but